Good morning, Chair Postman, members Garrett, Bollendroff, staff and guests. The lobbies are open and the recording has begun.
Good morning, everybody. We'll convene the Liquor and Cannabis Board Caucus meeting for April 18th, 2023. First up is a legislative session update from Mark Webster. It'll be your last during session update, if I'm counting right. So Sunny dies Sunday, right? So you got
That's right.
6 days, including today.
But who's counting? That's right. Good morning, Chair Postman and board members Garrett and Bollendroff. As David alluded, the end is near. We now have a confirmed board and we have a full slate of new work thanks to the legislature. We've talked a lot about our two big agency requests that passed, the social equity bill and the THC one. But that's only a part of our new work. And I thought I might loop back and talk about some of those other bills that we'll be working on. I should just mention that our bills are through concurrence and should move to the Gov's office for review quite soon. They're not quite there. Most bills haven't made it all the way through all the paperwork needed to cross the street and go to the Gov, but we're going to start seeing that happen soon. A few are already under review by the governor, one of which we talked about here is 1730, the bill that extended some COVID-era allowances for 18 to 20-year-olds to work in alcohol licensed establishments. But we are seeing several bills that impact the agency make their way through that process. One of the big ones is the limited duty law enforcement bill that was so important to our enforcement and education team. The alcohol delivery bill that we've had a lot of discussions about, Senate Bill 5448, and the psilocybin bill, Senate Bill 5263, which was amended in the House. And we should probably talk about that one a bit because it looks a little bit different than the last time we discussed it. The final bill creates a new psilocybin advisory board, which is distinct from the psilocybin work group that I believe was created last year. And that group includes both the LCB and also is part of the named people, an individual with experience working with CCRS. So there's still some interest in exploring or looking at whether CCRS or something like it could be utilized in the psilocybin world. There's also an interagency psilocybin work group for LCB, the Department of Health and Agriculture, to try to design or recommend a regulatory framework. And then another psilocybin task force chaired by HCA that would be kind of trying to stay up on clinical data, research, and gaps in the research. So that's a lot of LCB involvement in those work groups. The bill now also includes an actual pilot program administered by the University of Washington's Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences to actually offer psilocybin services to patients, to populations like veterans and others suffering from PTSD. Now, we even get work from bills that didn't pass. Tomorrow, Chair Postman will be representing the board in a work session in the House Regulated Substances and Gaming Committee on that adult entertainment nightclubs bill, Senate Bill 5614. As we talked about, that bill is dead. It didn't pass cutoff, and it would have allowed alcohol sales in strip clubs that meet certain workplace safety and fair treatment policies. So the advocates are going to come down and be at the work session to describe why they believe it helps, and opponents will have their say. But they've also asked the LCB, along with the Department of Labor and Industries, as the two agencies that would regulate the clubs. And so both us and L&I will get a few minutes to talk about their view of the policy and implementation. I believe there's a history here, and the board essentially asked the legislature to take action on the alcohol licenses and workplace safety together, not to separate the two and just do the alcohol on its own. But if there are other things that you think Chair Postman should mention in that 5 to 10 minutes, by all means, let him know.
Yeah, let me address it real quick because I was going back and looking. The board considered a rules petition that would have allowed alcohol at adult entertainment clubs back right after I started here, a couple months after. But Ollie, when I went to look at the minutes, I think you were not there that day. It was Russ and I. And so I want to be careful about when I speak, and obviously Jim wasn't on the board yet. So, I don't want to speak to the sense of the board, but I'll tell you what we talked about then, which was, so there was a work group that the legislature put together that included entertainers, club owners, and others. Someone from Working Washington was on it. And they came up with a package of recommendations, 4 primary recommendations. One of those being to allow the sale of alcohol at these clubs, because the workers felt that actually, in some ways, raised the clientele a little bit. Like, it made it a more of a social event. They had a couple of reasons why, and also brought in money that they thought might help them. But the legislature didn't act on any of the other recommendations, which had to do with worker safety and things of that sort. The club came and petitioned for the alcohol piece. My feeling at the time was, when you read this task force report, it really was, as Mark was, it was a whole. It was like, these things need to be done. And one of the main messages that they put in that report, when you read the comments from the workers themselves, was, I can't remember exactly the phrase they used, but they had a great, motto, which is, nothing about us without us. So, like, don't regulate us without talking to us about it. And so when it came to us and we looked at that, and I will say I kind of pushed this, which was, we shouldn't allow the cherry picking of this. Let's not just do that one piece. But at the time, Russ, I think, and I certainly expressed no opposition to the underlying policy of alcohol at these establishments. But really felt to do, fair treatment to the people in that work group and the workers, the legislature should do all of it. And so that's where we were. And then the legislature tried to do it as I think there was a budget proviso, and they still haven't done it. They haven't taken that big vote. And I would just sort of go and repeat that tomorrow, which is, the board was did not object to this as a policy, but did want to do what we felt was being in alliance with the workers, which was do all of this. Don't just pick some of it. So if that makes sense to the two of you.
That does make sense to me. I appreciate the update, and I would love to see the report that was done at some point, just so I could review it if it's available. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think it's good that that's being done tomorrow. I do recall reading the report, and I recall some of the things that was brought up, but even with the workers, when they talked about, it gave them the visual to monitor drinks and what was being consumed.
That's right.
Compared to people knowing no alcohol is being served and getting boozed up before they walk through the door, and on and on. So I just saw some good points there, but I think it's good that that the workers are feeling like their voices are being heard in the process.
Right. Yeah, good.
Yeah.
That's absolutely right, Ollie. That was one of the prime things they talked about. Customers coming in and out through the night, drinking out in their car or whatever. So you can't monitor it. It does tend to more over drinking. And frankly, some of these arguments were just what we heard from UW.
I was just going to say that.
Some of the policy in the stadium, right? So it's like, fair enough. Yeah. Anyhow, so I'll do that tomorrow morning, and I'm sure it'll be brief.
Thank you for doing that.
Again, the bill didn't pass, but it passed the Senate. It's passed at least one House committee. This is coming back. We have not seen the last of this one, so it's not going to pass this year, but it's certainly not going to go away. So I think it's good to keep monitoring this. The big remaining job for the legislature is to pass the budgets for operating capital and transportation. I've heard the budget could be released on Friday, and I've also heard Saturday. Saturday is leaving it extremely late with sine die on Sunday, and it has to sit on the bar for 24 hours. So I really hope Saturday isn't accurate, but we'll see soon enough. And then I think that's potentially tied up in the big story of the past 10 days, the DDE pesticide findings. So we briefed dozens of members on Friday. We invited all of them. We got, I forget how many, but some 30 or so. And there are all sorts of ideas for ways to help the impacted farmers, some of which could take the form of budget provisos, some of which could be recommendations to you as the board, some of which could be studies. So I think we'll soon see what they come up with. That's all I've got.
Okay, great. Any questions for Mark?
No, one of the things that I mentioned to Mark last week, and it was a bad time to try to reach out to Bryant, but on our social equity bill, I think it would be good if we do a communication, I don't know if it's called an op-ed or what, where we talk about how we got to where we are and now having a social equity program where we detail from going back to 2020, it started with the outreach that the LCB did to hear from the industry of what happened or what they perceived happened and why they got left out and on and on. And from there, it led to us having the agency request bill for social equity that led to the task force. But I think we need to do a write-up detailing from beginning to where we are, how we got here, as we are announcing now, once the governor signs the bill, the social equity program.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And if we can time it to that bill signing, that might be great. So we have it
That's a
that
good
day
idea.
to send people.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea too, and it's really I think would be great to tie it to states that have come on since we have, to talk about how they're actually doing this at implementation and how they've learned from our mistakes, if you will, and how important it is.
Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff there that we should talk about. I don't know if Brian's on, but I'll follow up and make sure Chandra and we'll do that. Good idea. Okay, great. Thanks, Mark. Have a good week. Next, we'll do a little more on what Mark was just mentioning there about our emergent issue on chemical testing in North Central Washington. We did have a series of meetings last week, and we want to have a chance to let the board know something about those conversations. We also got some tests back Friday morning. So Chandra Wax is just going to give a quick update on those tests and related things that we might not all be up to date on. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for the opportunity to provide an update, board chair and board members. As you know, we had some random test results come back positive above that 0.1 action limit in WAC for DDE in the Brewster area. It's a 5-mile region, and we've identified that location. As a result, we placed 5 holds so that we could do further testing. Our enforcement and education staff tested over 100 on-shelf products in retail locations, and we went out with ecology and tested the soil, water, and product at the 18 licensed location in that 5-mile area so that we can get more information to make best decisions moving forward. We have begun to receive some of that on-shelf product test results back, and they've been at 2 to 3 times that 0.1 action limit for DDE. And then we have not yet received any other test results back, but we did request and receive an expedited timeline agreement from our partners at the Department of Ag. And so we do expect some of those tests to start coming in the next 5 to 7 days. Currently, we're working to identify the pathway so that we can communicate with our licensees the pathway for compliance and getting non-contaminated products into the marketplace. So what that means is just letting people know exactly what we'll need to see to move forward to lift holds. And then you also heard about the partner meetings we had. So I've been meeting weekly with our partner agencies, with executive staff at our partner agencies to make sure that we continue to be working together towards the best solution to this. And then we had a meeting with our certified labs and with the interested and invested legislators, and also with our licensees, and then with the trade associations. So those are groups that we have kept informed and continue to keep informed, working closely with communications to make sure what we're putting out is appropriate and reasonable, and then of course continuing to work on investigations and partner with folks as we look at potential solutions. Any questions?
I have several. The and I just was writing them down as you were speaking. So one of the things I wrote down is, do we know, and I'm sure this has been looked into, what's the level of this that other states have? Was one of my questions. And then in the meeting with the industry and the people that was being impacted, what was their overall saying? And is this something that might have been out there all along and we're just detecting it, or is it new that this occurred? That was a lot.
That was a lot. Let me make sure that I answer your questions. So when this level, the 0.1, was established in WAC, I think it was 6 to 7 years ago. As you know, I was not here, but we have been able to do some research and just make sure that there was an intentional, deliberate process that the agency went through when that was established, and that is the case. So, and that includes consulting experts, relying on our partners at AG, and looking at what other states are doing. We have looked into some other states as far as what their levels are, and it is I know Oregon is the same, and I believe there's one other state that's exactly the same. I don't have that right in front of me. I'm obviously focusing on the investigation portion of this while trying to support everybody else's work and the research too. So I know Dr. Hoffman has done some work on that topic.
Okay,
And then
I'll reach out to Kathy later then.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
And then as far as the partner meeting with our licensees, I felt like it went really well. Our goal was to hear from our licensees, and we did that. They asked questions about what to look for moving forward, and they asked questions about the results that we had found. We were able to share with them. We had just that day received the test results that were above, that were 0.2 and above for the on-shelf product. So we were able to make them some of the first people that had heard that information. And then just asking for records, and which we are able to provide. So I felt like it was a positive meeting. Of course, it's having a severe impact on their businesses, which we are aware of. And so that's why it's super important that we're communicating. We're having trouble getting some records, and so we're working to partner with licensees to get records and just navigate this as collaboratively as possible. Did I answer? Sorry, go ahead, Jim.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to ask, I had asked this once before, but I wanted to clarify. I had a question about the water, and you mentioned, so first of all, have we gotten any results of water testing and ground testing and all that? We're still waiting for that. Okay. So my question.
So we went out, I believe, on the 11th and submitted those tests on the 12th, and we're looking for, we can expect water and product samples test results from those 18 locations 7 to 14 days from the date of test submission. So the 19th, tomorrow, would be the first day that we would even maybe expect to see that. And then soil is going to take 30 days.
Okay. So the follow-up question then about the water testing, and I don't know what I don't know, so I'm just asking, and that is, I do know a little bit about watering of orchards in Eastern Washington, and some of that water comes out of the river and some of it comes from wells. And so my question is, do we know how the watering is occurring on these sites? Is it wells or is it coming from the river?
I can't personally answer that question, but I do know that our staff were out there with the licensees and ecology and making sure that we were collecting the right tests for the locations that we were at. So if you want to know more specifically that info, let me know and I can follow up on it.
Okay, thank you.
I would imagine everybody does a little bit of a different thing.
One of the important things I learned last week in those meetings, and I think this goes to the second part of your question, Ollie, about has it been out there all along? And the answer is yes. The sense is that this is in the ground. DDE exist outside of being a byproduct of DDT living in the ground for a long time. It has no commercial use, so it's created by this. And the Department of Ag told us, and told each of the meetings we were in, that this area, you know, we're talking about a very narrow slice of the state in Northeast there, you know, this 5 mile or whatever it is range, is known to the Department of Ag as a place that had heavy DDT use back in the orchard days. And so nobody has suggested that this is anything that's been applied by anybody who's a licensed grower today. It may be, you know, 50 years old. I mean, DDT has not been legal for close to 50 years. And so there's a legacy here. We don't know all of that 100% for sure when it stopped, because they also said that in this area, you know, the farms were just heavy users of this, and they had some stored on site and things. So it was there when people started growing there, is what I would say.
And that leads to, I guess, I won't say why now, but knowing that that area had that, and it's hindsight. I mean, we're where we are right now, but to wait all of these years to kind of test the products coming from there. But
that's not really the case. And it's a great question, because some said this. So, and Chandra has more details, but let me just get the overview here is that, you know, since whatever it is, 7 years ago, let's just say, we've had the authority to do random tests for chemicals that are not allowed. We have a list of allowed chemicals, and then a test that enforcement can do anytime that would show chemicals that aren't allowed. Since we started this, we've tested over 600 times around the state for a list of 243 different chemicals that the Department of Ag is able to test through their lab. This area, again, this little circle, 5 mile area, has been getting hot tests, I would say at least from 2019, maybe 2018. And in each case, there was some action taken. So it's not that we never cared or didn't follow up, but we didn't see the pattern that we see later. So there was a series of tests in 2022 that were relatively high, and another cluster. And we have somebody taking a new look at this, and the paperwork was frankly going to different people who looked at it and went, hey, we should talk about what's going on here as a whole. So this has been out there. The growers who tested positive were made aware of it at the time. They had holds placed, sometimes product destroyed. And we continued to test, and it, you know, didn't go away. And the pattern was alarming to smart people who took a look at it recently and said, hey, we should focus on this a little more. And so then what happened, as Chandra was just telling us, you know, we did these product tests. So we already had tests on the ground. We would test foliage from the farm, but then we went into a store and took something off the shelf and tested it. And that's showing pretty high numbers, you know, certainly twice the limit and above that.
Which I'm glad you clarified that, because what that's saying then is this wasn't just a shot new to the folks. They kind of been knowing all along that there's been some hot tests and on and on.
Yeah, certainly the people who tested hot knew, and you know, and there were recalls and all that. So it was
Okay. All right. Thanks.
But, you know, and Chandra said, and this is true, it is so disruptive to the businesses. And I think we're all very empathetic to that. It's hard. And in the way they look at it is, well, we didn't do anything wrong. You know, this is a legacy here, which I understand what they're saying, but we have a standard in rule, and we're, you know, mandated to enforce those rules. And I don't think we have any science that tells us we could relax it. And Chandra and I have talked about this. In a way, this is working like it was supposed to work. We have a list of things that aren't allowed. We set a limit, it's not zero, because I think we've all learned that zero is not really zero. But 0.1 is a knowable level, but not very much is known about DDE. Not much is known about how it relates specifically to cannabis. There's just a lot that's tough. So we have to have a standard, though, that protects the public health. So we got a lot going on. I think enforcement education is doing an amazing job, just managing all this tests. I would say most of our licensees have been cooperative, but not all. And so that creates even more, work and tensions. Briefing legislators, working with our partners, the partners from health ecology and ag have been great. But it's just a ton of work. And then at the same time, we are looking at what are those other paths? What can happen? How do you allow somebody to stay in business? What would need to happen? Is there a process? Is there a fix? So we're working all these different channels at the same time. It's a lot. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Anything more on that, Chandra?
I'll just continue to keep you up to date as we hear test results, and thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Okay, next, this is a conversation we've been trying to have for a while. Justin Nordhorn is going to join us, Director of External Affairs, to talk about a idea that Jim Vollendrop's been intimately involved in, which is to add a research position or positions, opportune time to talk about it following that previous conversation. I'll just turn it over to you. Jim, do you want to say something first, and then Justin can go in?
Sure. Thank you very much. And Justin will cover the details of this, but I have worked in the public arena for over 20 years, and every department or agency that I've worked in has had a research section within it to help advance public policy and to also make sure that we're making decisions that are based on science and research. And so this proposal before the board today is to further that. And I think as we get into the details, you'll see the value that it brings to an agency like the LCB in particular. And I have learned I've been here almost a year now, unbelievably, that how important that would be, and just feel like it would be an incredible value. So I'll let Justin present, and then I'll fill in from there.
Great. Justin.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Postman, members Garrett and Vollendorf. So wanted to present the work that we've been doing since late summer, early fall last year. We've been exploring this issue, creating some concepts, and then doing a lot of exploration and dare I say research into the research program. So we took a look at these concepts really because there's so many rapid changes going on, particularly in the cannabis product marketplace, and having a lot of unanswered questions. And that kind of creates, a lot of unknowns that are out there that we're unable to respond to. And we spend a lot of resources in a lot of parts of the agency, not necessarily coordinated, in trying to figure out what these things look like. So in particular, the Delta 8 came around, a lot of youth access concerns, risks, unregulated markets, those types of things. And as we responded to these, we had some legislative interest and demands for this type of information, and we were, kind of doing it piecemeal, if you will. So I know Kathy, Dr. Hoffman, spent a lot of time doing this. I've spent a lot of time doing this. We've had people in licensing doing different things. We've had people in enforcement doing different things. And so, there's been a lot of work on different topics, but having it in a central area, I think, would be very beneficial. So we've been increasingly engaging in these complex scientific issues and subsequent policy developments, and we're often tasked with finding information on a variety of these topics to conduct comparison and analysis, particularly with other states, as was even raised in the last conversation. So, this isn't most this isn't in the job description of most jobs within the organization. It's not the primary function, and yet we do get pulled away from the other important work that we're doing to be able to tackle some of these issues. So approaching research in an intentional manner to gain neutral and objective and scientific information is really important to be able to have the appropriate information and context so we can make informed decisions. So approaching these will, mitigate risks of misunderstanding, create some uniform conclusions. We need to not only research, but we also need to distill and gather this information into a digestible form so those of us who are not scientists can understand it easier as we're discussing these particular issues. And so the exploration that we've done included looking at other states and other county programs within our state. So we looked at New York Office of Cannabis Management. We've also looked at the Massachusetts Cannabis Control Commission. We looked at Pennsylvania cannabis regulators. We also talked with the King County Board of Health, as well as looking at approaches and types of job descriptions and related materials from WISIP, which is the Washington State Institute of Public Policy. So, we branched out to look at a lot of different programs, and we found some commonalities in those programs. And in looking at not only the skill set needed, but the capacity issues, we kind of settled on a 3-person team. So we would be looking at proposing having 3 people do the research work primarily. Does that mean that they wouldn't reach out and collaborate with other divisions? No, this is going to be a centralized unit that supports all the divisions. So if somebody in licensing, for example, needs to do a cross comparison with other states, this team could actually pick that work up so they don't have to pull somebody else away and then create a report for that. So, some of our reasons for pursuing the research, we want to have a dedicated resource area to collect and analyze the data. We also want to create, reports to better inform policy development and implementation. We want to consolidate our focus. Being more proactive really allows us to look and analyze it at things in a deeper level as well, I believe. And so, what types of data, would folks be looking at in these research positions? I think we could look at things like population data, density of outlets, needing to pay attention, of course, to mixed methodology, not just simple data collection. So we want to look at the qualitative and quantitative. And then there's also the multiple aspects of the industry, community impacts, effectiveness of our rules, et cetera, and of course, public health. So as we're exploring these things, we're really wanting to make sure that we have a capacity and support to be able to explore this as best as we can. So when we're looking at the 3 positions, what we identified is making sure that we have a a research manager that would handle some of the budget issues, as well as collaborating with the universities and other research entities. We've conceptualized even for future state, possibly looking at seeking funding to incorporate grant type of approaches and be able to share research goals with other folks, and then maybe help pay for those so we can forward and advance those areas. And so the second position would be a researcher, of course, and what we looked at working with HR and looking at the state classification schedule. This would be a regulatory analyst position, but this would be our researcher. And then the last position is a management analyst, which would be the data kind of person that would gather a lot of the information from the researchers. They may do some independent research, but also they would be the position that would boil this and distill it down into digestible material. So whether it's infographics, reports, executive summaries, those types of things. So when we get a 70-page report, we can get the details that we need for the conversation up front. And that's really an important skill set that needs to come into play. So the team's going to hypothesize, collect data, analyze it, of course, form some conclusions. They're also going to seek partnerships, again, with other research entities and groups, universities, state agencies, and that's going to maximize our research opportunities, we believe, given that, everybody's got limited resources. So if we can do a force multiplier, that's going to be a real benefit for everybody. And some of the questions that had come up before around topics. And so what would this team be looking at? I mean, I covered a little bit, but we identified things, just off the top of our head in a brainstorming session, stuff like the social equity factors that go into that, comparing with other states. We could have used a group for the THC content issues with hemp production. What does it look like? What are those thresholds? What does it mean? General product accessibility. There's a lot of policy work that goes into outlet density and product accessibility in the alcohol side of the equation. And so that would be something that I think would be very worthwhile looking at, particularly because we're one of the few states that have alcohol impact areas. And what does that look like and mean for different communities across the state? Of course, prevention of underage access, safe, responsible consumption for adults, public health impacts. What does that look like for the different products? And of course, then the marketing, advertising, manufacturing, those types of things. So I'll pause there, and I see Member Vollendorf has a question. Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a couple of things. So thank you for that background. You mentioned already that we have checked with other states. We've talked to other places. I just wanted to make sure the board members also know that we talked specifically to Jillian Schauer from Canara to find out what states are doing which states actually have research sections within them. And many of the innovative states actually have research sections already created. So a lot of this is modeled after what we're seeing in other states. And either Justin or myself have talked to those groups to find out what they're doing and how to set this up to be most effective. One of the things I also did when I first started at the LCB is I met with traffic safety, I met with the healthcare authority, I met with the Division of Behavioral Health and Recovery, and I talked to their research teams, and I started asking them about the data that they have. Then I was looking at our data, and it's one thing to look at your own data in isolation. It's another thing to look at data across state agencies. And when you look at data across state agencies, it really begins to tell a different story. And I think that that's a powerful component of what this group can do for us. The other thing is, and Justin, I'm not saying anything Justin didn't already report, but the field of cannabis in particular, it's innovative and it's evolving and it's going to continue to evolve, and new things are going to be coming at us. And a research team can be and should be looking out in the future, what's coming towards us that we can be proactive about and be prepared for as the industry continues to evolve. So I just wanted to add those pieces.
Great, thank you. And then, a couple final thoughts on that. We had some questions come up around, shouldn't we contract this type of work out? And I think one of the things is we can prioritize the work better. Having a unit, we can also pivot better. So if we're looking at a contract for different things, and you're talking about change orders and building in additional work for those companies, and that also takes time. And so if we have the research unit, we'll be able to pivot and adapt and prioritize the work as the demands come in. So we also have some questions about how are we going to prioritize, what to research. And we were proposing bringing this to the management team and say, hey, what makes the most sense for all the divisions? This isn't going to be a unit that just, hey, we're going to do X. I mean, of course, they're going to be generating plans for research and doing proposals and hypotheses, but they're also going to be listening to the directors to say what is important for the work that we're doing internally. So the operations equations can also maximize on this research opportunity. So, some of those questions came up, and we talked at length with HR and our finance team to really line this out. And so we are in a position right now that we are ready to go if the board is comfortable with the concept and moving forward. And I think that obviously when we're looking at a return on investment, I think we're going to save time. I think it's going to build efficiencies, but of course we don't have something tangible right now. But I think that we do have an opportunity with implementation now to actually even showcase some return on investment by the time late summer comes around, when budget packages are needed and those types of things. And so we'd be able to showcase some of the positive benefits that this is contributing towards the agency. And I'm happy to answer any questions that folks have.
Yeah, couple things. I think we need this. We need it badly. I wish we had it last week, and you know, because it's the exact right thing. And so I think it's fantastic. I have had questions about it, but again, not at all about the value of adding that research thing, just the process that we use to come to this decision, which, you know, is not personnel decisions, that type. Staffing is not always a board decision, but this was board initiated, and it's, you know, 3 people, it's a full office. What was the process for, you know, any competing needs internally? How was that aired out? You know, the fact we have to start it with existing funds, and then, you know, right when we're, you know, about to get our biennial budget. So, you know, it was my concerns if, you know, and Justin and I had talked about this, and I've talked with others about it. But, you know, I guess I'm just saying that for the record. I just think when we do these things, if I were designing, I would make sure there's some internal, not competition, but we got to weigh these things. We got to triage everything that comes before the board. We have limited resources, and how do we do this? What is the timing of it? You know, we're about to get a new director. We're making a change at the director's level. So I had concerns about that process, but not about the value of the end result. And then the only thing I'd say, Justin, about sort of how do we decide what to research, and would hope, you know, I think that one of the pieces of this is the board has questions often about, what about this? And we'd like to be able to, I think, have folks research things on our behalf as well that might not, you know, correspond exactly with management team priorities, but board priorities, which sometimes have slight, you know, not opposition, but, you know, we're moving ahead. We're looking at something different than you guys might be looking at. And I would like to have some capacity there for board initiated research to help us make decisions on what management team is bringing us.
Absolutely. I think that those are great points. And I think when we're looking at the 3-person approach for a unit, it provides that flexibility that when these questions come up, whether it's the board or elsewhere, that somebody could pick those up. If it's just a 1-person, you know, coordinating effort around research, you know, everything is going to kind of get backlogged, if you will. But, you know, we may be running some surveys and those types of things on one front. And then when a question comes in, somebody else can pick that up and run with that part. And I think that that's really where the 3-person team is bringing in the flexibility to be able to respond to those evolving issues that we often seem to see.
Yeah. And what's the actual org chart piece of this? Who does the top researcher report to?
So the research manager will report to my position, which is policy director, and then they will also be a part of the policy team, but they're kind of on their own. So and we're actually setting this up even internally from a logistical standpoint. Been working with IT to figure out where's some space, because on the 5th floor we're quite full. But so this team will actually be housed in a different area of the agency, and so they'll have a very neutral and independent area that people can come up and interact with them. You know, without you know, the other policy discussions going on at the same time. So I think that that's going to be a good approach as well.
Okay, great. Jim?
Yeah, one thing I'd like to propose is, you know, as board members look at areas that they're interested in, this is an area that I am very interested in, and an area that I've got a lot of experience working with. And so I would just put out there that I'd be willing to work with this team. I'm glad that you brought up, David, because I completely agree. We have priorities that we also have interests in. I'd also like for the board to be regularly updated and involved in some of the projects that are being approved for the research team to be working on, so that we're really involved in this. So just throwing that out there is something I'd like to be involved in.
Oh, I think absolutely. Yeah, that'd be great. Okay. Ollie, any questions or? Okay.
Excellent.
All right. I think we're good. Thank you both.
Sounds good. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Justin.
Okay, moving into rules petition review, Dr. Hoffman will present the petition from Chris Gerard. Good morning. There you are.
Good morning, Chair Postman, board members, Garrett and Bolandroff. Very brief presentation this morning. We received a petition for a rule change on March 20th. And the petitioner cites a part of Washington Administrative Code that does not exist. So I'll just refer to it as he does in the rule petition, and that is WAC 70345-030 sub 4. This is actually a statute, so it's one of our vapor statutes. So I won't spend a lot of time going over the analysis here, but we did a very deep dive into the regulations that we do have authority over and that we can change by way of the Administrative Procedures Act. So all of our vapor rules are housed in 31435. And even the language that's being proposed to be changed does not exist anywhere in the WAC over which we have authority. So the issue presented to us is whether or not the board can amend statute through the rule development process. And the answer to that is no. And so there really was no feedback to offer from any of the divisions. There's no impact there because the board simply doesn't have the authority to change Washington state law through the rule development process. So the only option here truly is to deny the petition. I'll leave it there. Any questions? It's pretty straightforward.
Could you give us the authority to change state law and rules? Because that could come in handy. I'm going to take
Single-handedly, I could not. But
Okay. Thank you for that. Then
my pleasure.
we'll entertain a motion to accept the staff recommendation there to deny the petition request by Chris Gerard.
Sure.
No?
And just
Board meeting.
yeah, during the
Oh, we have
board
to do the board meeting. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
No, that's all right.
I'm 8 days ahead.
You are. I think we're on a bit of a roll this morning. So I'm there with you.
It doesn't even say action. Okay, my apologies. Thank you. We can
No
we can
worries.
think about this for a week, but now you know what I'll
Yes.
move for.
Absolutely.
I think it's clear. We don't have authority. Those are easy. Thank you.
Unfortunately. Yeah. Thank you. Any other questions, concerns? All right. Thanks very much.
Good, thank you. Okay, we are to the point of board member and executive assistant reports. Dustin, anything to report other than that it's Tuesday and not Wednesday?
No, Chair, thank you.
Okay. Jim or Raleigh, anything more on reports? Okay, so the board now is going to go till 11. Okay. We have an executive session scheduled at 11, but we're not able to start it before 11. But for the public and staff's information, we'll go into executive session at 11. That could last up to an hour, but when that's over, we will adjourn and there is no other business. So we're not going to take any action when we come back. So anyhow, apologies on the timing, but we're going to, board members, we just have to stand at ease for 11 minutes. And then we'll reconvene and go into executive session. So talk to you then. go. Okay, we are back from at ease. The board will now go into executive session to evaluate the qualifications of an applicant for public employment or to review the performance of a public employee. I anticipate the executive session will conclude at noon. If we complete our business earlier, there is no further agenda on our meeting, but I will come back and adjourn the meeting when we are done. So with that, the board will stand by. We will move into a breakout room for our executive session. Thanks. Oh, when you
get moved over, you might have to let her in.
okay. Okay. Great. Jim, can you hear me?
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can, yeah. All right. No Ollie yet, but
I'm just moving her over
she's
right now.
gonna come over in 1 second.
Yeah, I can hear everything.
Oh,
There she goes.
there you are. Hey,
Okay. All right.
just stand by.
You can log out of your service. No,
Okay, we're back here. Okay, the board is out of executive session. We met to evaluate the qualifications of an applicant for public employment or to review the performance of a public employee. It's now 11:57 and we will adjourn the board caucus for April 18th, 2023. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Turney, the one person in the audience.